Thank you very much for having me here. And now I'm working for Guangdong Academy of Social Science as a legal researcher. Today, I'm going to talk about the case of the statue of Zhanggong-zushi. So I would like to share the slide. In fact, there have been numerous cultural objects stolen from China. Why I choose to talk about this case today? In my opinion, this case is very interesting and controversial and important. Its importance is twofold. First, it's the first case that the Chinese original owners seek restitution through international litigation. Actually, they take parallel proceedings, both in China and the Netherlands. Second, this case is not only a dispute of property, but a case concerns people's religious beliefs, spiritual matter. This case is very different from the case of relics like from Yuanmingyuan, the old summer Paris, which in my eyes is a matter of national dignity, or it's the legacy of a century of humiliation. But this case is different. My presentation today will be divided into three parts. First of all, I would like to talk about the story of the statue, the background of the case. Second, I will elaborate on the court battle over the statue. And third, I will briefly discuss about the ethical issues of trade in religious relics and human remains. Let's have a look at the image of the statue. This statue is called the statue of Zhanggong-zushi. Inside the statue, it contains a mummified remain. It contains a mummy. It was made during the Song Dynasty around 1100 AD. About its provenance, it was reported missing from Puzhao Temple. Puzhao Temple was a village temple of Yanchun village. Yanchun village was unknown to almost everyone, was unknown before 2015. But after that time, everybody, it seems it is a very well-known village, but before that time, it was unknown. And it was believed that this object is acquired by a Dutch collector called Van Overeem at Amsterdam. Van Overeem said he acquired the object from a collector who bought it in Hong Kong in 1996. The discovery or the rediscovery of the statue is very dramatic. Villager, because this statue was on exhibition in 2015. It was exhibited in the Dutch Museum and also in the Hungarian Museum. And a villager from that village see the images of the exhibition of mummies on his cell phone, and he just found that, oh, this image is so alike to the image of, is so alike to the statue of Zhanggong-zushi, which was stolen from his village. And he just sent pictures to the whole village, and the whole villagers were so excited, and they started the campaign to seek the restitution of their mummy. On the information on the labels, it is that the monk was named Master Liu Quan. In fact, Liu Quan, it's a term. It's a term in Buddhist. In Buddhist beliefs, that means the mummy is intact because his body, his head, and his feet and his hands are intact, because so it sticks intact. in techniques in Chinese if we put it into Chinese translation. Actually, when the dispute arose, when I was almost finished my PhD. I was preparing my PhD defense at the time, actually, and many reporters came to me because I did the research on restitution of Chinese relics in Amsterdam. And reporters came to me, they asked me about my opinion about the case. They asked, oh, can the religious recover their lost statue? So I have, when I began to look at the details of the case, I found it was so interesting and controversial. After I did my PhD, I came back to China and I paid a 2-day visit to the village, and I had known more about this case. And you see the slogans on the mountain. It is that also the slogan on the right side, they collect signatures from the villagers. On the slogan, it is that, oh, expecting the coming home, expecting Zhanggong-zushi coming home, something like that in Chinese. And they also collect signatures from the villagers, also visitors from outside the villages. And they also raise fundings to recover the statue. They told me that they had already, at that time, they had already raised around 20,000 euros. So with such funding, they can maybe host visitors from outside, host researchers or legal professors who have an interest in looking into this case. Okay, I just want to figure out why the villagers spare no effort to recover the statue. So during my visit to the village, I spoke to villagers, and they told me that the story of the statue. According to their description, Zhanggong was a skilled daughter living in the Song Dynasty, and he was also a Buddhist monk, and he was credited with helping people. During a plague, he saved many lives by treating disease. So he was respected by the locals. Before he was dying, he was mummified himself, and as a miracle, the process of mummification is done. There is a mummy. Because the mummy in Buddhist represent immortality. So when the mummy is finished, the locals sew the mummy into the statue. That's what you see in the picture. I asked how the villagers feel about Zhanggong-zushi and how they feel about the loss of Zhanggong-zushi, and these other words, they told me that. One of the villagers told me that Zhanggong-zushi knows all. He does not only protect the villagers, but also makes the villagers' wishes come true. Another one said to me, we grow up with the statue. He was there day and night. He is our spiritual leader, the doorman of the temple. Said, Zhanggong-zushi should be worshipped with offerings in our temple. Every time I think of that, he has not been worshipped for over 2 decades. I grieve. That's the practice of worshiping Zhanggong-zushi in the temple. After after the statue was stolen, the villagers made a substitute copy of Zhanggong-zushi and placed it in their seat in the temple, and they continued worshiping. Even in the darkest age of cultural revolution, the locals risked their lives to protect the statue. That's why after the Cultural Revolution, the statue of Zhanggong-zushi is still intact. Until 1995, it was stolen. After negotiation failed, the local villagers sued the collector in court, both in China and in the Netherlands. According to the villagers, they said we had no other choice but to sue the collector. Speaking of no other choice, because I had done some legal research on this regard, and first we'll have to look at international conventions. We have to see whether the international conventions are applicable to this case. But in this case, the international conventions are not applicable. In this regard, we have two important international conventions. That's the UNESCO 1917 Convention on the means, the 1917 Convention adopted in the UNESCO, but the Netherlands only accessed to this convention on March 31, 2009, which makes this convention not applicable to the case. Another convention is the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention, but this convention came into effect in 1998, and this convention only applies to cultural object which is stolen after the effect of the convention. So this in international law, most of the international conventions are not retroactive to historically stolen object. That makes restitution so difficult. If that object was stolen after 1995, even though it was after 1995, but it was behind the entry of force of the convention. So these two conventions cannot be applied to these two cases. So the local villagers took legal actions against the Dutch collector. We have to look at let's have a look at the argument between the plaintiff and the defendant. The plaintiff argues the statue in the defendant's collection is the one that was stolen from the temple. And according to Dutch law, a person is not allowed to have a non-body in their possession. But the defendant argued the statue in his collection is not a statue of Zhanggong-zushi. And also, the village committees is not a legal person, not a natural person under Dutch law. That means a village committee cannot be seen as a plaintiff in the court. Third, the defendant also claimed that the case is barred by time. During the passage of time, maybe in the statute of limitation, this case is barred. Let's have a look at the Dutch legal decision. The Dutch court rendered a verdict in the end of 2018. The court just dismissed the case by stating that the committee of the village was not a natural person, not a legal person as required by the Dutch law. Actually, I was very surprised to see such a verdict, because as a lawyer, I think it's a very simple legal question. It's not easy to, it's very easy to check the rules of qualification of a plaintiff, but how can just a very simple idea to me, oh, maybe the lawyer made a very stupid mistake, but the Dutch judges didn't go into the details of the fact or the law, and he just dismissed the case on the qualification of the plaintiff. And so I was sorry to see the outcome. Okay, let's look at the Chinese legal decision. The Chinese legal decision was made after the Dutch decision. It was registered earlier than the Dutch court. Then that registered in the Dutch court, it was registered in the Intermediate Court of Sanming City. On December 11th in 2015, but the judgment was rendered 5 years after the registration. The judgment contained over 35 pages, and the judges elaborate on all the factual details, also the laws of this case. And these are the key points made in the judgment. The court decided that the statue is collectively owned by the villagers, because there is a neighbor villager of named Dapu. The two villages filed the legal action together in the Chinese court. The court decided that this statue is collectively owned by the two villages. And second point is that the court reiterates that human remains constitute an important category of cultural heritage. And in the end, the court orders the defendant to return the statue to the plaintiff within 30 days. So we can see the two judgments of the Chinese court and the Dutch court. It's totally different outcomes, right? But as a lawyer, we can see that such a judgment, the Chinese judgment, it's very easy for it to be recognized and enforced in the Netherlands. So this case actually highlights the dilemma of restitution through international civil litigation. For instance, in this case, the plaintiff have to prove that the statue stolen from Puzhou Temple is the statue in the defendant's collection. The villagers said, and their lawyer said, they had enough evidence to prove that the statue is the one stolen from the statue in the defendant's collection is the one stolen from the temple. And the Fujian Provincial Bureau of Cultural Heritage also confirms that the object in Fan Overeem's collection is the statue of Zhanggong-zushi, after they organized experts to check all the details. But Fan Overeem contested that. Van Overeem said his predecessor acquired the object between late 1994 and earlier 1995, which is earlier than the date that the object was stolen from the temple. But he cannot provide documentary proof of the sale. So the first legal obstacle is to prove that that's the same object. The second one is when a Chinese original owner tried to file a lawsuit in a foreign court, they will have numerous legal problems. They are unfamiliar with legal proceedings. For instance, in Chinese law, a legal village, a village committee is it can be a plaintiff under Chinese law, but under Dutch law, it's another story. Chinese village committees cannot be seen as plaintiff under Dutch law. Third, we'll see that even though the Chinese court rules in favor of the original owner, but we can see that this judgment is very difficult to be recognized and enforced by the Dutch government because there is no such agreement, international agreement between the Dutch government and the Chinese government to recognize and enforce a civil judgment. So maybe the Dutch court will have to check the details of the Chinese judgment. Probably the Dutch court will refuse to enforce the judgment because of public interest. Last but not least, in most cases regarding stolen cultural objects, we'll have to face the problems of good faith acquisition and statute of limitation. Also in this case, if the current possessor claims that he is a bona fide possessor, can he acquire the title through good faith acquisition? Also, with the passage of time, has the collector acquired the title by the passage of time? So all these problems constitute a dilemma for original owners to seek restitution through litigation. But also this case raised issues of trade, especially ethical issues of trade in religious relics and human remains. As I have discussed above, Zhanggong-zushi has been regarded as a god in the locals. Even it's a small group of people, maybe around 30,000, no, maybe 3,000 people in that villages and of Yanchun and of Dongpu. It was a very small a small group of people, but they really believe that Zhanggong is the god and they have strong connection with Zhanggong. But this interest is always ignored in the cases which is heard in foreign court. In most of the case, the judge only regard it as a property dispute, not a dispute of religious relics. The court always lack discussions of the religious interest of the local people or of the indigenous people. So, but it seems human remains always attract attractions in society. These attractions to this interest of human remains always relates to Europe's morbid mafia craze since the Middle Ages. Actually, starting in the 17th century, merchants sought to profit from trafficking mummies. They make a lot of money by selling mummies. At the beginning, mummies was used as medicine. Also, it's linked to superstitions. They also organized mummy unwrapping parties in the old days. Nowadays, maybe mummies was taken good care with respect in public institutions, in museums. But we can see that there is a booming trade in human bone in Instagram. Also, this case opens up discussions on the restitution of cultural relics concerning religious interest. Also in Europe, we can see that it's people usually used to trade in Christian saints relics in the Middle Ages. And holy is, for example, bones, hair, and nails from a saint will fetch a very good price in the Middle Ages. Measures also, the church have taken measures prohibiting trade in saint relics, but it was not very effective. Also in China, many religious relics have been taken out from the religious place, or especially in the very remote countryside, like in a village like Yancheng, people do not pay enough attention to the care of, do not pay attention to their local folk religious treasures. But when it was stolen, and it was very difficult to get it back, because a foreign judge, maybe a foreign judge or a foreign court can only look at or judge this case based on property law. So to sum up, maybe someone argued that maybe we shall make these commodities like human beings or religious relics acts inalienable commodities. Is it helpful to stop the trafficking of cultural relics? So I think we have to think about this issue. To sum up my presentation, I think I was so sorry for the villagers, and I feel sympathetic for them actually, and I was very moved by the connection to the statue, to their god. But it seems under the existing law, is that buying back, the villagers will have a very difficult journey to recover their god. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.